Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hello, and welcome to the video wrap-up show for the Shrimp Tank podcast in Seattle. I'm Dan Whedon, and I'm joined by my co-host, Michelle Bomberger. We had a fascinating and fun conversation today with our guest. See, I was so worried about Cazares that I messed up Grest. Let me try. We're just going to start all over again. I told you it's usually me. I'll edit this out for Luke. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to the video wrap-up show for the Shrimp Tank podcast in Seattle. I'm Dan Whedon, and I'm joined by my co-host, Michelle Bomberger. We had a fascinating and fun conversation today with our guest, Chris Cazares. To catch the entire episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really want to binge watch us, you can catch all of our episodes on our website at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to not only hear about your law practice, but to hear about some of the experiences you've had that led you into the current practice at Polaris Injury Group. So you shared that your why, so the core of how you found yourself in this practice, was around caring for people. And you shared that your experience in the military and in the JAG Corps has framed that caring mentality and everything you do in your practice today. Can you share a little about those details with our audience?
You bet. So the JAG Corps, one of the things that I think most people do is they hide behind their strengths, and there's ego behind that, and ego can be a great thing. And what I felt like that JAG Corps did for me was there's this thing called role theory, and it put me into roles that I would not have otherwise asked for. So I didn't ask to be a prosecutor. I didn't ask to be a defense counsel. I didn't ask to get stationed in Guantanamo Bay. I didn't get asked to be a senior trial counsel prosecutor at Nellis Air Force Base. But in being forced to do that, i.e., you sign up into the military and you get orders, I got to expand my role, and I learned these different roles. And as a legal professional, we bring a certain amount of, well, naturally we're advocates, and all of those are litigation roles. So we bring a lot of our person to that. If I wouldn't have been given those orders, I wouldn't have found those things out about myself. And there's something about stepping into places with people and trying to, and having a mission that you swear to do it, and you're going to do it. And so you have to follow through on that. So I'm very grateful for the JAG Corps.
I'm going to encourage, Chris, everybody to listen to the entire podcast because it was so much fun and we learned so much about you. One of my favorite parts was when we talked about that you have a nurse on staff, so to speak. And as I was doing preparation and on your website, I had to do like a triple take because I'd never seen or heard of that before. And it's all part of the being personal in personal injury. Can you talk a little bit about that nurse on staff and her importance to you in multiple ways?
Right. Usually people do a triple take because they're like, are you sure she's married to you, Chris? Well, in fact, Nurse Devon, also known as Lieutenant Colonel Cazares, retired Devon. She spent 20 years in the military. I was lucky enough to catch her towards the tail end of that. The way to do this, Dan, is you marry somebody, you have kids with them, and then they're kind of stuck with you. Just kidding. And then when she retired, I was like, hey, it's my turn. Like, what are we going to do next? And it just so happens that in her service to the military, she deployed to Iraq, to Afghanistan. And speaking of role development, I mean, I don't know if Devon would have ever chosen to be on an ER floor serving in that capacity because it's very difficult. But she did. She triaged soldiers who were wounded in battle. And you take all of that experience and you take her heart for doing good and service to others, and you put her in a personal injury firm, married to the attorney. And what you find is somebody who is listening to a client, and clients are classic underreporters. They're not sure if what they're like, is this right? I mean, there's nobody to tell them like, oh, that symptom matches this thing. And as you take them in and they're telling you about their care, you're like, yeah, that's a great person to go see. You should see that chiropractor. You should go see the neurologist. You should go, traumatic brain injury is a real thing. Or her having the awareness to say, I understand your symptoms, but I need to talk to your husband. I need to find out what's really going on, because as you know, with traumatic brain injury, what's going on here isn't necessarily matching what's going outside. And that kind of expertise, this has only happened one time for that client. Like you don't go around the block getting a TBI, right? Or having some other traumatic event. But for Devin, she's seen this thousands of times. As the attorney, as the staff, we've seen this hundreds of times, thousands of times. And it's her job, her mission now, to make sure we get from injury to recovery.
Chris, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank today. For our listeners, I really highly recommend you check out the entire show. This is just a snippet of what we learned about Chris and his background and his practice. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you or learn more about Polaris, how can they get more information?
You bet. Our website, polarisinjurylaw.com, and Chris at polarisinjurylaw.com. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Yeah. Make sure you check out all the replays at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, iHeart, Apple, Spotify. Please also follow us on our social media pages at YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Chris, thank you again for being on. Michelle, as always, it was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to our next one in 2023. Or no, I guess December still 2022. So take that back. Our last one of 2022, we'll get together one more time. Everyone, please join us every week at 12 p.m. Pacific for our live stream broadcast on our Facebook page. Our next show will be December 7th. Please join us. Until we see you again, be healthy, be prosperous, and of course, have fun. Because for right now, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp